Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Krashy, and today we're going to be jumping into a tier list for the Hoopa release patch, or state of the game with Hoopa in it. We're going to be talking about what I think for solo, duo queue. Maybe I'll throw in some like 5-stack thoughts in there as well. But the thing about my tier list is that I tried to keep it relevant to solo, duo, trio queue, but I still want to talk about the character strength. So it's not entirely just what characters can carry, but I'm trying to do like a nice little mix of a tier list, but mostly aimed at solo duo queue. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Let's start with the all-rounders. All right, Aegislash, I think, is a pretty great character, but the character doesn't excel in any position that it could take super highly. It's like an okay laner, and it's a pretty good jungler, but it's not the best jungler, which kind of keeps it down in the tier list, I think, a little bit. I may end up shifting this around a little bit, but right now I'm thinking that it's a really solid B+ tier. The character can be really strong and can get a lot done, but ultimately there will always be something that is slightly better than it, whether it's Lucario in top lane, Machamp in top lane, Cinderace in jungle, something like that. So while I do really still like the character quite a bit, I think that it is not necessarily the best pick in the world. As for Dragonite, Dragonite is an incredibly consistent pick. You know that when you are jungling Dragonite, you're going to get that level 8 Hyper Beam. You're going to have the potential to get Dreadnoughts, to flip objectives, to bring, like that spamming Unite move for Score Shield, for like Buddy Barrier, and for Score Shield capping or dunking. Couldn't think of the word. So Dragonite feels really, really consistent. Still not the best thing in the world. I think that it probably sits in like a comfortable A tier, and yeah, it's a pretty solid jungler. I'm also going to try to use more of my tiers if I can. I feel like I always like ignore C and D tier, but it's not, it just feels so weird to put characters that low. All right, Serena. I think Serena's really bad now. Like I said, I want to try to spread my tier list out a little bit more if I can. I think this character has really been over nerfed. I'm talking bad. The nerf to this character just I don't know, man. I was so worried this was gonna happen, but this character, it's not like it's super useless or anything. It's just there's no way that it compares to basically anything else of the role that it can do. It's like Aegislash, but like way worse, and that's unfortunate because the character is really fun, but it's just not very effective. Ultimately, as for Lucario, this character's still S tier. It's never probably not going to be S tier. It's ridiculous in lane. In competitive, it's ridiculous. In solo queue, it's actually not as crazy because it's harder to stack. But realistically, you can still just stomp games and go crazy with this character. I don't remember if I actually put this in S tier the last time I did a tier list, but it is. It really just is. The character strength itself is S tier. Even though it's not as good in solo queue as it is like in a 5-stack, it's still incredibly strong. Garchomp. You know, Garchomp is not really the most solid pick in the world. It's way better than it ever used to be, and I feel it's a lot like Aegislash. Like, it's a really solid jungler. It can kind of top lane okay, but it's just never going to be the number one pick that you want to take, but it really scales into endgame pretty well. So while I think there's more application for something like Dragonite, and you can definitely guarantee more value off something like Dragonite, Garchomp's got to fall down a little bit, like close to Aegislash. Just not quite as useful. But Charizard is very good. I think Charizard is like A+. I think it's just a really strong jungler. It's not the best jungler in the game, but it's really high up there. It doesn't have a lot of carry potential because it has a lot of carry potential if you can get ahead. It doesn't have a lot of carry potential because it doesn't have secure. So if you have teammates around and you can get like the Dreadnought, and you can secure objectives with your team, then it's really good, because the character itself team fights super well. But it's like, I like picking Charizard, but I'm also always scared to pick Charizard in solo queue because, you know, you need teammates to kind of like help you secure things and guarantee that you can stay strong. But if you're strong on Charizard, you're really strong. And Machamp is like the same thing. It's like a really good top laner. But in solo queue, it's not as good. Same thing as like Lucario, but the character itself just has a ton of strength. So even if you're like jungling this character or coming out of lane with this character, you're going to scale really well. Has an insanely strong Unite move, really good CC and burst damage. Machamp is got the seal of approval. All right, let's move into let's do speedsters. All right, Gengar. You know, Gengar honestly isn't like the worst thing in the world in solo queue. I actually do think that I would rather have, I don't know, this is a weird one, right? Like, I'm putting Serena lower than Gengar, and I think that that might actually be true as far as solo queue goes. I think that Gengar is like not very great, but it has a lot of potential, and in solo queue people don't really deal with it that well, and I kind of think that it's not that bad as far as, you know, jungling goes, because you cannot be laning this character. It's still not good. I basically wouldn't recommend ever picking anything that's B tier and below, because I just feel like why? I mean, even B plus tier, like, you could always pick something better, but at least these characters are fun and somewhat effective. This character is just like, it's okay, and it's like somewhat effective. But ultimately, I just think that it gets pushed up a little bit because of solo queue, but it's a really weak character. Doesn't have the greatest early game, doesn't have the greatest Unite move, just isn't super impactful. As for Zeraora, Zeraora's in a really weird spot because the character's strong. Like, the strength of the character feels like it's like around here, but it just takes so long to get going that it sometimes feels like, why would you ever pick this character over something else? So a part of me wants to float it in like B tier, B plus tier, and I think that's where I'm gonna leave it because it has a really strong Unite move. It's got really strong moves. You can delete people with it, and this is one of those picks that people always tell me like, oh, you're definitely rating it too low, but it has to do with the fact that the character is a little weaker and it gets its Unite move at 10, which is just, it's a detriment. It's a detriment to the character. If this character was exactly the same balance wise but had a 5-7-9 leveling curve, then I think that it would be A or A plus tier. It just is slightly behind, and I mean slightly. Like, it almost is A tier. I'm just gonna put it in B tier because that's where I feel most comfortable with it. Absol is honestly, as far as solo queue goes, I think Absol is a pretty A tier pick. You can steamroll games really hard. Now the irony is that Absol is one of those picks that is specifically way better in solo queue than it is in like 5 stacks or something. Same thing with Gengar. Like, Gengar is honestly pretty useless as far as 5 stack goes. Like, nobody would ever pick it, and Absol's the same. But this character in solo queue has really hard carry potential because you can stomp early and then it's hard for people to catch up because they're uncoordinated. That's what makes it so strong. So if Absol comes out of the jungle and you're completely decimating people, then you get Dreadnought, then you stay ahead. And like, if the game just snowballs out of control, it's really hard for people to deal with. And Talonflame, honestly, is A plus tier. This character is still insanely strong. You have the Fly Brave Bird build, whichever one you want to go. Both of those builds are insanely strong. And as far as solo queue goes, really good carry. You can do crazy damage and like fight people with the Brave Bird build, or you can be more objective secure / scoring kind of a build with Fly Flame Charge. So really strong. All right, Sylveon. You know, Sylveon's pretty solid. I almost wish I wouldn't have done Sylveon first because I kind of need to think about where I want to put the other attackers. I'm going to start Sylveon at A. I may push it down to B plus tier. The character's solid. It's just there's always a better lane attacker than Sylveon. There's a couple specific lane attackers that are better than Sylveon. But Hyper Voice still really crazy damage, and Mystical Fire is still pretty good with some like mobility that it brings the character. But the character just isn't the best. It has a level 8 Unite move that is kind of just like a defensive move for itself, more or less. And it's an okay character. It's pretty strong. It's one of the better SP attackers overall, but not the strongest. Alolan Ninetales. I think that this character, it's a lot like other B-tiered picks where the character is good in lane, but just like does not scale like almost at all. Like, you just can't get the character to do anything in like mid to late game. It's hard. You can burst people with your like kind of like ice combo, but outside of that, your Unite move's not very strong. You don't have any mobility. The character's just really been suffering for quite a while, and so has Cram. Cram is in kind of like the same position. A part of me actually thinks I'm gonna put these two down here. I don't even know why I'm trying to put them so high up. Like, they're not terrible or useless, but honestly, I don't think there's like almost ever a reason to pick them right now. And Gengar's kind of the same. He's not the most useless thing in the world, but there's really no reason to pick them, in my opinion. As for Greninja, I actually still think that Greninja is just like S tier for solo queue. This character, this is one of those characters that truly is just like a hard carry. You go into jungle, you can carry the game, you do your best. Sometimes I win games just because I'm Greninja, because I have Surf Secures and crazy Unite moves. I get ahead, and it gets pretty out of control. And make it no surprise here, Cinderace is also up there. Cinderace, if you get fed, the game is just like over. Like it's basically just over. You have such ridiculous attack range. You're just stomping through the team fights. People they can't get to you. You're kiting them. You're blaze kicking over them. Flame charging around them. It gets really overwhelming. All right, Pikachu. You know what? I'm gonna go pretty crazy right here. Pikachu and Venusaur. These are the two lane attackers. These lane attackers are nuts. They bring a ton of damage to the lane. They both scale into late game pretty well. Pikachu very strong in the early game. Venusaur ramps up pretty gradually. But Pikachu is a stun monster that spams Unite moves and can get Unite move back very fast. Venusaur, Giga Pedal Dance. You're just staying alive. You're in the mid fight. You're diving in. You're kiting back. You're doing muscle band damage. Like it's crazy. These two characters are like the best SP attackers in the game. If you're laning, these are one of the two characters you need to be playing, basically, because why not? You know, they do damage. They're the better attackers. These are the characters that you really want to be bringing to the table. As for Gardevoir is the other really good SP attacker, but mostly plays out of jungle because this character is just not the strongest in lane. I would not recommend taking this character into lane, but this character brings crazy damage, crazy pressure with the range, future sight resets, the stun on Moonblast or the slow on Psychic, crazy Unite move. This character is, if you're jungling, this is a great character to learn. It's a little hard in solo queue because you still need peel and your teammates kind of have to help you, but it's still really strong. Decidueye. It's got its whole own tier. Useless character, man. You die way too fast to be effective, even if your teammates are playing around you. The character is just so bad right now. It is in desperate need of some like light reworks or big changes. It's just in a really tough spot. To try to do this damage it's not worth it. You want someone that's high mobile with good damage, not zero mobility with crazy damage, because then you just die instantly and it's not even worth it. The trade-off is just not really there. All right, let's move into the tanks. Greedent. I honestly think that Greedent is an S tier tank for solo queue, an S tier defender. This character is not really a defender. It's a lot like an all-rounder, which means that it can do damage, it can be annoying, it's tanky, you can jungle invade with it, you run around the map, you're hard to kill, you have a great Unite move, you have good secure depending on what build you're playing. Like, the character is a really well-rounded character that does a little bit of everything, that brings a ton to the table when it comes to solo queue. This character is arguably, in my opinion, one of the best characters to play, one of the best Pokemon to play for solo queue, just because of how ridiculous and obnoxious and frustrating it can be. I'm not kidding. I genuinely think that this character, really crazy. Really crazy. As for Snorlax, I think that Snorlax is somewhere around like B+ tier. This character, it brings a good amount of CC to the table, but this is a truly team-focused character. And while I still want to talk about the strength of the character, I actually think that in general, Snorlax has gotten kind of power creeped pretty hard and doesn't really bring enough to the table in this current version of the game for whatever reason. It doesn't have the greatest Unite move. It brings some good CC. But that's really kind of all. I think the Unite move is actually this character's biggest detriment, and it's funny because it didn't used to feel like that with this character, and I don't really remember when people started shifting away from this character. But like when Wigglytuff got buffed, people started using Mr. Mime as a tank, and then slowly we just started shifting away from Snorlax, and now Snorlax doesn't really get a lot of play. And as far as solo queue goes, I mean, it's already hard to tank and support in solo queue, but Snorlax just not the best option, but still a really consistent and solid option for sure. Slowbro. Again, this is where, when it comes to talking about tanks and supports, we're talking about the strength of the character almost more than we are just about how good it is in solo queue, because solo queue, you have to kind of lean that into like solo, duo, and trio queue. So assume that you're leaning on some friends when playing some of these picks, but we're talking about the strength of the character. Slowbro rather is really strong, super hard to kill. Just a ridiculous pick. Can still bring a ton of damage to the team if you're running a muscle band. Brings crazy CC with the Unite move and Surf, especially if you get level 11 Surf Plus. If you bring Telekinesis, that's more CC. That's a little bit more reliant on teammates though, because they have to follow up. Otherwise, you can use Amnesia, heal yourself, make yourself unstoppable, which I definitely recommend for solo queue. And the character is just crazy. Really, I mean, I literally play games in solo queue with Slowbro where I out damage like Cinderaces on my team. Granted, they're not very good, but just saying, really, really strong. really strong. All right. Blastoise for solo queue is honestly one of those characters that I think gets pushed up a lot. I almost want to put this in A+ tier because I think if you're playing solo queue, I might do this. The thing about Blastoise and solo queue is that if you're playing solo queue, you don't really have to worry about like 113, and this character kind of struggles in 113 lane. It's like not the best tank in the world for 113, but it's still really strong to have on a team. So you're going into solo queue, you're probably going to have a 2-1-2 lane setup, so you're probably going to be able to farm decently on this character. And while the early game of Blastoise with Squirtle isn't the strongest, you can probably get your farm easier than you would if you were playing in a 5-stack. Now, having this character in the mid to late game, very good. Crazy Unite move. So honestly, I think Blastoise is a lot like I said, like with like Absol or Gengar, like where it gets pushed up because we're talking about solo queue, where the strength of the character actually would be a little bit lower in my opinion. I think the character has a lot of viability in solo queue. All right, Mamoswine. I'm not gonna lie, I think, oh gosh, is Mamoswine this high up to me? Mamoswine's so good, but it's almost a little bit more team reliant, and therefore it makes it a little bit harder. Mamoswine is ironically, I think, a better tank than Blastoise. Is if this was like a little bit more of a regular tier list, Blastoise would probably be down here by like B+ tier, and Mamoswine would be barely less effective than say Slowbro. So Mamoswine is like at the highest point of A tier in my opinion, like encroaching A+ tier as a tank. Character has super strong laning phase, and it just kind of slowly falls off toward the mid to late game because it doesn't have the best Unite move, but it brings crazy CC, really good CC to the table. And again, it's a little bit more Snorlax-esque in the fact that what you do with this character requires follow-up, whereas I think you can throw like a muscle band on and do a ton of damage with, say, like Blastoise, that Mamoswine can't really achieve on its own. So really strong character, but still requires a little bit more collaboration and teamwork with your team. All right, Crustal. Crustal is another one of those picks that gets pushed higher up the tier list just because it's Crustal and solo queue. You can run Fluffy Tail or Goal Getter on this character and just score the whole game. Like, you just score the whole game. 300 points, 350, 400 points. That's what this character does in solo queue. You're not going to really help in a team fight too much, but you can still pop off with this character. And it's definitely another one of those characters that gets shot up the tier list just because it's solo queue. But this character is actually surprisingly decently efficient or effective, and you can get some really high score with it, and that can be hard for uncoordinated teams to deal with. It just can. It's hard for them to deal with. Trevenant. I don't know. I think that Trevenant's just not the best pick in the world, but it's not the most useless thing in the game either, if I'm being completely honest. It's somewhere here. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not even being super picky here. I don't really think it matters too much. I'm trying to figure out what I think about it. Like, in relation to solo queue, it might be a little bit better than Snorlax, so maybe I'll leave it on the same tier list and we can just like hypothetically say that I'm putting it higher than Snorlax, because it might be a little bit better than Snorlax in solo queue. It definitely is better than Snorlax in solo queue, so I'll leave it in the same tier. I don't think it encroaches the same effectiveness in solo queue that you could get out of, like, say, a Crustal, or being aggressive with like a Mamoswine and having some follow-up. But it can fight a little bit, it can do some things, it can stay alive for a little while, and ultimately that makes it pretty solid. But ultimately there's something better. So something better, but pretty solid. Alright, that's going to be my tanks, and now we got to jump into the supports. Mr. Mime for solo queue honestly is really strong. Like, character brings a good amount of damage, good lane pressure, great Unite move. The character has like taken a small hit. It's fallen in the meta a little bit as far as team queue goes, or like 5 stacking goes, but it's still really strong. You're still seeing it played in competitive, and honestly, Mr. Mime's just a great character. Great character. All right, Eldegoss. I still think Eldegoss is a phenomenal S tier pick. Like, I gotta be honest about it. This character, especially if you're playing trio and you want to bring an Eldegoss to the table, you're gonna bring an Eldegoss to the table. You're bringing shields, you're bringing mobility, you're bringing heals. The character is still strong. That said, I don't know if, relatively speaking, I should bring it down, because I am going to also put Hoopa in S tier. Now, the reason why I'm putting Hoopa in S tier is because of like that solo duo trio queue kind of thing. You play this character in solo queue, and it's really not that strong because you have to have teammates to get the full effectiveness of it. But I'm talking kind of like solo duo trio here. The character on your own is not the strongest thing in the world, but it has crazy potential. So it could be super strong if people are playing around it. And it is a super strong character, probably literally speaking, the strongest character in the game because of Hyperspace Hole. So if you're playing with a duo or a trio, at least you can influence like Hyperspace Hole portals around the map. If you're playing solo, you can still influence those same portals. You just can't guarantee that you're going to get value out of it, right? You can't guarantee it, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. So Hoopa, honestly, is just an S tier pick Pokemon. I think that this character is insanely strong. I want to put it in that position. I think Eldegoss, for the same reasons, insanely strong. Relatively speaking, though, I actually think I'm going to pull Eldegoss down, which is just feels crazy because, I mean, we're still talking solo queue, but I actually just think that this character bumps it down. So I'm going to do that. That's what I'm thinking. That's how I'm feeling. I don't know. It feels weird to do it, but I think it's time. And Wiggly's got to, you gotta, here, we gotta move you over a little bit, Wiggles. We gotta move you over a little bit, Wiggly. Oh gosh, shift over. Wiggly is still phenomenal. As far as solo queue goes, again, you still need teammates unless you're playing like a rollout build, which you could do. It's totally fine. Or scoring a lot, which you could do. Totally fine. But the character is still insanely strong. Again, it's another one of those like solo duo or duo trio kind of angles. If you're playing with a Wiggly player, they're going to help a lot. If they're showing up, if your teammates are showing up, if you're going to wherever your teammates are going in solo queue playing Wiggly, you're going to get a lot of value. This, again, leans on the strength of the character, not necessarily how well you can just hard solo queue carry a game, but the character is very, very strong. And Blissey, you know, Blissey is somewhere like down here. It's strong, especially if, like, say you're duo queuing with like a Venusaur. The character is good. It's a very, very team reliant. It's probably the most team reliant character in the entire game. You literally do nothing if somebody else isn't around you. So, but that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm feeling. I wanted to spread the tier list out a little bit. A lot of these characters, again, you know the deal. The disclaimer is that tanks and supports, it's just based on their relative strength to like the actual game. And then solo duo is just, it is what it is. Solo duo trio queue. If you can get value out of it, cool. But you're going in at your own risk, right? If you're going in with a tank and a support, you go in at your own risk. Otherwise, look at some of these other characters, man. This is what you want to be playing, and this is where I think they fall. So friends, thank you so much for watching. Drop a like on the video and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think, what you would change around, and ultimately, somebody try to convince me that one of these characters is good, because you do it every single time. But I hope you enjoyed it. As always, be sure to be kind to one another. Tell someone that you love them, and I'll see you on the next video.